swag, and you rappers just on my damn tail. Follow my footsteps but always fail. Nobody does that just like me, trying to live it big like ODB. Get a tissue for your trust issues. If you got one thing, I never missed you. I can't believe that you hit me up after the times I gave you up. Not gonna cuss, it's not me. Watch your door real closely, uncomfortably. The old me, relationships unlikely, bitch.
I'm Timbaland, and this is my masterclass.
Hello, I'm Hans Zimmer, and this is my masterclass.
Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. It's Lewis P here. Today what we're going to be doing is a complete overview, review, comparison video of Hans Zimmer's Masterclass versus the Timbaland Masterclass. As always guys, I have a link in the description which will take you directly to the Masterclass, so I got you back there for $90, or you can purchase the All Access Masterclass for $180, and that'll give you both of them, as well as all the other Masterclasses that are currently out right now, including the Deadmau5 Masterclass and the Armin van Buuren Masterclass. But hey, let's jump right into it. So in this comparison video between both Masterclasses, we're going to look at their history. We'll compare both their classes and how they're structured and how they're basically taught to you. Then we'll compare exactly how they begin and how they really lift off when it comes to their teaching methods. Then we'll look at the type of producers and musicians that they are. Then we'll compare the producer tools that they use and how they work with teams and orchestras and people. Really, really interesting. And then we'll explore how Masterclass isn't necessarily showing everything before they actually sell it to you. So I'm going to show you a few things that they've actually missed out on the main page and really expand on some points which are really interesting. And I find it very odd that they haven't included these things in their course guidelines. And as a final note, as always, which masterclass will work better for you as an investment and the type of musician and producer you want to learn and ultimately become. And I know the first question you're going to ask is, why in the world are you doing a comparison video between Hans Zimmer and Timbaland? That just doesn't make sense. It's like comparing apples and oranges. It doesn't make any sense, Lewis. What are you doing? But no, that's actually not the case at all. Hans Zimmer and Timbaland are actually exactly the same from a music production perspective, and both perspectives and styles can add value to the way you make music. These are both heavy producers at the end of the day, and I'll show you right now how it all works. And some people may say, why don't you just compare Armin van Buuren to Timbaland or Deadmau5 to Timbaland? For starters, that's a bit too easy, because with all due respect to the trance and the EDM producers, these guys are a lot more mainstream and appeal to a lot more people, which I think is a lot more interesting, and it comes out as a more interesting dynamic comparison between the two. And I've already done the Armin van Buuren versus the Deadmau5 Masterclass review, which is on the top right of your screen right now. Moving on, interesting side note, I actually noticed, and I'm going to actually present this now, is both musicians said the exact same thing very early on in their masterclass. They both said how they communicate is through music, and they apologize if it doesn't come out right in English. This is very interesting. So they both discuss and talk about music as though it's a language. And here's an example of Hans Zimmer communicating through music. This is really powerful to understand.
And I stopped speaking because I feel I'm having a conversation right now with you. Ooh, it's a bit of a dodgy question here.
And here is an example of Timbaland doing the exact same thing, trying to express the way he talks about music and how he needs to communicate it in such a way that you really feel what he's saying.
It's hard for me to talk about music. It's something that, because I can express it more than talking about it. Like if I said, ooh, the bass line. Okay, what? And somebody might be smart. A quarter note? No. That's how I talk.
So you can see at the end of the day, these are true musicians that have gone on a different path, and it's really powerful to become a student of each one. And they take you on that journey when it comes to how they communicate it. And while you're taking the masterclass, you really feel where they're coming from. So let's talk about their history and where they've come and what inspired them. So Timbaland is a Grammy award-winning producer and takes you behind the scenes to teach you the process of creating iconic tracks with artists. And we're talking about major artists here. We're talking about Jay-Z, we're talking about Missy Elliott, we're talking about Justin Timberlake, Beyonce, all of these major players. And we're talking about Timbaland as one of the best producers and musicians on the planet right now. And that's a really big statement to say. And it's sort of true, because he has worked with the best talent and he teaches you how to work with this talent as well. Really interesting how he takes you into the booth with real world musicians and how you should be treating artists. Really powerful stuff. And then Timbaland talks about his influences as well. And he doesn't really see them as influencers per se. Timbaland talks about his curiosity and how he views these artists, the Dr. Dre's, the Teddy Rileys, the DJ Premier, the Rodney Jenkins, the NASAs, as artists and craftsmen. And he tries to discover how they build these different sounds through the analog process. And he talks about his real acknowledgement of the analog world, how it was back in the day. On the other hand, you have Hans Zimmer, who has scored 150 films. And we're not talking about small indie films here. We're talking about the Leonardo DiCaprio's Inception, The Lion King, The Dark Knight Rises. We're talking about AAA box office, multi-million-dollar budget movies. We're talking about the biggest production productions on the world with virtually unlimited budget in music terms. Hans Zimmer has made people cry, he's made them cheer, he's made them laugh, and every emotion in the book in his music. And you can say the exact same thing about Timbaland as well. So before we go into the course structure, I want to tell you how the masterclass actually jumps off. So Hans Zimmer jumps right into the themes of music, how it works, how to create themes. However, Timbaland talks about melodies, which is very, very interesting because now you're going down your different pathways when it comes to the way you create music. And you can definitely draw theme music into melodies, and you can definitely converge the two. If you take both masterclasses, you will see very similar trends here. But you will see that a theme is very similar to a melody when it comes to an idea of creating music and how he creates music for the audience per se. So Hans Zimmer jumps right into Beethoven V and how you can find the most simple things to test and put in motion. And then you also see this in the way Timbaland creates his music. It's just a different style of learning and a different vibe. Of course, Hans Zimmer tells stories through his music, and you can see Timbaland tells his stories through his music, and they end up with major artists and obviously very influential artists. However, Hans Zimmer talks about how he tells stories through the largest films in the world, and that's a very interesting take on how to begin both masterclasses. So let's jump right into the structure of both masterclasses and then compare the two. Timbaland has 15 episodes and Hans Zimmer has 30 plus episodes, but some of the videos in Timbaland's go for like 35 plus minutes, so we're getting a lot of value from each class, and it actually feels like taking 40 plus lessons when you do the Timbaland masterclass because there are multiple lessons in every single video. And Hans Zimmer on the hand has, of course, 30 plus, and the videos go for around 10 to 35 minutes, which still makes it feel like a real class, and it is still very long. There's a lot of depth to Hans Zimmer, but you'll get a lot of value out of Timbaland as well. With Hans Zimmer, you go right into the deep end. You hear the epic music he's created, his music setup, and then of course his room, which is beautiful, by the way. You actually saw it at the start of this video. But you also need to consider when these masterclasses were produced, Hans Zimmer was one of the first ever masterclass ever built back in 2016. And Timbaland's masterclass was released in 2019. So masterclass got a lot of feedback from our community and gave us more of what we want and less of what we don't. So go easy on the Hans Zimmer. Like, he's an absolute legend and deserving of 30 plus lessons. We're talking about amazing talent here. And you can see this from the amazing camera work as well. The shots, how the shots are set up, how they're pictured. They were also able to capture more of who Timbaland is in a short amount of time. And you can see they were much more casual and sporadic when they shot Timbaland's. When Timbaland felt something in his music, he would rush back to the microphone booth and you see the camera pan, and it's really funny how it works. But that shows how masterclass has actually grown from a very formalized type of masterclass professionalism into more of a casual type of environment. And it isn't as cinematic or serious, which is actually really good in the context of Timbaland. So you can see how much fun he has, and this is actually really fun to be involved in, and you actually feel like you're in the room with Timbaland as he's doing these things. And just because Timbaland only has 15, 16 lessons, don't let that deter you from investing in something like this. Timbaland doesn't mess around. In lesson 1, he jumps right into making a full track, and here's the kicker, with only his voice, and shows you the true foundations of producing music, which every producer right now needs to see, because this is so important. It isn't about the plugins, it isn't about all the synths, it isn't about all of these things, and Timbaland is a beautiful example of that. Of course, he introduces us to his team, his crew, how he jumps and works with his team and makes music. He gives you the absolute brief of what's going to happen in the masterclass, but it's really cool how he shows you how he makes a full track with his voice. And Hans Zimmer does something very similar to that. He talks about how he makes his music, how he works with directors. So you go into another world. On one hand, you have Hans Zimmer that teaches you, okay, how I'm working with directors. And on the other hand, you have Timbaland, who's also talking to you about how to work with artists, how to build and work with the best tracks in the world. So that's really interesting to see as well in the course structure. So let's go into the type of producers and musicians that they actually are. And if you don't know who either of these two are, that's a bit awkward. Not many YouTubers will actually tell you to do this, but I don't care. Pause this video right now if you don't know who Timbaland is, if you don't know who Hans Zimmer is. Pause the video right now, open up another tab, Google Hans Zimmer Stay, and then also Google Timbaland musician, and you will see the type of music this guy has produced. Now, I'm going to go into something a bit controversial here. This may be completely off, but I feel like Timbaland generally produces music because it's fun for him and he can literally do and create whatever he wants. Sort of like a child at Disneyland, which is cool. Yet I see, and don't go crazy on me when I say this, I feel like Hans Zimmer is open to his creativity and all, and that's great, but he always falls the victim to having to fall in line with the directors and what they want and the story that they demand of him. So it's an interesting comparison between the two. Timbaland acts like an entrepreneur in music, but Hans Zimmer is sort of like having multiple jobs and needs to fill the role he was hired to do. And it just so happens that Hans Zimmer is just working with movie budgets, budgets, which we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here. So we're sort of like, we have someone that's set in a role that needs to fill the role, but at the same time has the freedom of unlimited budgets. And that's why he can work with orchestras with 50 to 100 people in it, which is insane. So then let's jump into the producer tools and how they work with teams and orchestras and talent. So in lesson 1 for Timbaland, it's sort of like jumping into a new role for the first time. He introduces you to his team, his engineer, his producers, and he's really modest and humble around them, which is really crazy to see from someone of that status and success. It's really cool to see his producer act like this. Then in video 5, you see him start working with big artists like Jay-Z, and that interaction is so cool to see. He doesn't refer to them as rappers as well. He's really respectful. He actually refers to all of these guys like the Jay-Z's and all of these amazing talent as artists and poets. So you're getting into Timbaland's mind in almost every sentence he speaks. And that's why having 15 lessons doesn't feel like 15 lessons. It feels like 40 lessons. Whereas in Hans Zimmer, it's really just him in isolation, in his own element with no team around him. And you eventually see him playing on stage, then working with orchestras with 80 to 100 people, and then deducing all of that sound and putting it into his music production software and playing it. Of course, Timbaland uses a combination between Ableton, Logic Pro with his team, and then his engineer, which you see him do. His engineer mixes all of these DAWs together to present something to everyone. I've never actually seen that happen in the flesh before. So you see a Logic user, you see a Ableton user, and then in the between those two, you see an engineer that mixes it all together. And Timbaland is like, this is the best engineer in the world. You got to see this guy. He's so good. He comes from a lot of love, which is cool. Then Timbaland goes into the foundations of, how to actually create music. And then he goes into the most human foundation ever. And that is, if you know how to hum, that is the beginnings of building a track. And it's really cool. The next lesson, he goes right into the studio, works with the track he made with his team in lesson 1. So in lesson 1, he's already making a track with you, with just his voice. Really crazy to see. And this is where you first see him jump right into Ableton. You see him jump into Cubase and Logic Pro. Really cool to see. Hans Zimmer, on the other hand, uses purely Cubase because it's just him as a solo act using his orchestra. And it's really important to know that you don't have to be a Cubase or Logic or Ableton user in order to understand these masterclasses. If you know the DAW that you're using, for example, if you're a Fruity Loops user, then this will still apply to you regardless of the DAW that they use. Because as long as you know how to use the DAW that you use or the software that you use, it doesn't matter because it's all pretty much the same at the end of the day. It's just the interface by which you make the music. So the way he teaches is exactly the same. They both communicate through their music. Hans Zimmer uses instruments to demonstrate that. Timbaland uses his beats and his voice, which is really cool. Now, I want to talk about how Masterclass actually undersells some things. In the Timbaland description, if we use lesson 2, for example, Masterclass tells us that Timbaland teaches you how to build a song around a beatbox, starting with the loop, then he creates in the first lesson, and then adding harmony and melody and texture in lesson 2. But you get so much more out of it. There's a lot more than Timbaland just teaching us how to create harmony and melody and texture. He's talking about how to deal with writer's block, how to work with teams, and all of these additional things that you're not telling us. So update the descriptions, guys. But with Hans Zimmer, it's completely transparent and you get everything that you need to know, which is cool. And as a final note, I could talk for hours about these masterclasses and how they can compare, and I'll probably do a live stream, so make sure you subscribe to that. As a final note, which masterclass will work better for you as an investment based on what type of musician and producer you want to become? So here's where the answer is really simple. So if you're the type of producer who understands music in a very academic sense and you understand all of the components and are very traditional in the way you make music, then you need to explore Timbaland's masterclass, which I have a link to in the description below, because he will give you a fresh perspective and make you feel it and jump out of the rules that you are used to, especially if you've studied music. Now, if you are all about the feel and the groove and you really don't know everything about music and you don't have much structure in the way you do things, but still know how to create music, then I highly recommend that you take a step back and you actually invest in the Hans Zimmer Masterclass, because he will give you more structure and professionalism while also teaching you the entire world of music. And of course, I have a link to that in the description below as well. And if you want to get both, go for the All Access Masterclass, which will give you both Hans Zimmer and Timbaland's Masterclass, plus the 50 other masterclasses that are on the Masterclass network. And that includes Armin van Buuren's and deadmau5's Masterclass as well. So you can't really go wrong there. So you can pay for one masterclass and get one masterclass, or pay for 2 and get 50 plus. And it's sort of a no-brainer if you're really looking forward to moving ahead with this stuff. But anyway, P family, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know which masterclass you ended up taking, and come back here and tell me which one you enjoyed the most and what you got out of it. Tell me about your experience in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe if you want to and you want to join this little family that we have. But otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. It's coming out soon. Lewis P. out.
Everybody wanna be friends now, but not everybody been with me. Started with with a couple hundred plays now, but not everybody saw this me. I seen it coming, it was all or nothing. I knew the future gonna give me something. I put in the time, put in the work on my rhyme. Knew all along I was shine, I'm on now. Got a long way to go, won't slow down.